pal, it's me, Amanda, the Lazy Stitcher, and today I'm going to talk about books that I read in August and September. So, my downward trend of not reading a whole lot continued in August, which I kind of expected. It's hard to read during the summer with my kids around a lot more, and also we moved, which you can tell. I apologize for the slight messiness of the background because, again, we moved and this is one of the rooms that isn't so beautiful, unfortunately. It's gonna get better. It's already getting better instead of worse, but it is what it is right now. There's only so many places we can put certain things. My reading did pick up in September, but it didn't pick up until halfway through September, so I don't have a ton of books to talk about, even with both months combined, so I figured it would make more sense to just go ahead and talk about them all together and, save me from having to make a separate video. Okay, my first book to talk about is Too Hot to Handle by Tessa Bailey. This is the first book in the Clarkson series, I believe it is. This is a basic romance. It's between, I can't even remember the characters' names at this point. You already know that I'm not good at character names, even in books where I like the characters a lot more. Just saying. So anyway, this starts off with a gal who was in charge of her mom's restaurant, and upon her death, her mom wants her kids to all go over to the East Coast and swim in a very cold river. I forget which river exactly. I think it's in New York. Together as like a bonding experience. So the series is basically the four kids and their romances, because it's a romance, Now this one, and the guy is a local guy. I forget exactly where. I think it's somewhere deserty, Arizona-y area, and they get broken down, and this guy is going to help them. And obviously there's a romance between this gal and this guy, and he's kind of like the town bicycle of a man, and she is like kind of uptight. It's a little... The guy is definitely your typical Tessa Bailey thing, where it's like, I'm a man slut, and that's all I am to anybody, and it makes me sad deep down. That's a pretty typical thing with her characters. Unfortunately, that seems to be a recurring theme, and I've had enough of that at this point. This is a bit older than some of the other ones I read, I believe, but anyway. There was a good deal on it one day and I decided to buy it, is what it comes down to. This book was fine. It was hot enough, but it wasn't anything that special. The characters were very flat to me in this one. I think Tessa Bailey can really do super well with her characters, but these two came off really flat. I rated it 3 stars. It's pretty forgettable. I don't really recommend it. I like Tessa Bailey. And I think with Tessa Bailey, you're going to get a good amount of spice. Usually it's going to be a decent enough story, but this is not one of her best. My next book, I decided to read What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. This is a young adult, and I was very interested in it, though, because it's like an adventure-y book, and also it sounded very much like The Mummy, which... love that movie, like many others. And I was like, this sounds intriguing as the concept. So I'm going to again forget the characters' names, but we've got our girl, Inez. And Inez gets a letter. Like, she's living, I think in Argentina, I forget. She's living somewhere, I think in South America, with her family. And she gets a letter saying that her parents have died. And then she doesn't know what, she decides she is going to get herself on over to Egypt because that's where they were and that's where they were studying. Just kind of takes off from there of her following the mystery of what happened to her parents and also uncovering potentially Cleopatra's tomb. This book was a letdown for me. It just wasn't that good. I was really disappointed. It sounded like such a good concept, and it sounded like something I like. And most of the Book of the Month books are right up my alley, but this one was me. It just wasn't that great. I found Inez very irritating as a character. I didn't like her very much. There was this thing that she loved. She was very like one of those stubborn female characters, which, okay, fine. Like, I love me a strong girly, okay? And it's good for a girly to know what she wants. And guess I do root for that to an extent. But it was to the point of just complete foolhardiness. You know, it was getting kind of irritating. It's like, girl. And like one of the things she would do is when she would talk to someone and they would ask her questions, she would just keep changing the subject or asking them questions back. And I find that extremely irritating. She just grated on me. I didn't care for her as a character. And there were consequences to that, at least, kind of. So anyway, it was fine. It wasn't that great of a book. It wasn't terrible. I gave it a rating of 3.25 stars because it just, I know that the second one's come out, and honestly, I don't think I'm going to continue this series unless someone's like, "Oh my god, the second one's amazing! It gets so much better." I'm done. I'm good. And then next, unfortunately, I continued the pattern of meh books, and I read The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields. Now, this book, I have the Fairy Loot edition. I was in the Fairy Loot combo for a hot minute, basically. I only got like 3 months of it because too much money on books, you know what I mean? Like, I love books. Book subscriptions are fun, but there hits a point where it's like, this is too many books. Anyway, it's cute. This book, basic concept is we have a gal named Marigold, and Marigold finds out that she's a honey witch. And so she can do this like healing magic, a lot of it revolving around honey. And she ends up taking over for her grandmother as the local honey witch who helps cure people and helps them out with their ails. In the meantime, there is a romance between another gal named Lottie, and Lottie's very skeptical of Marigold's powers and whatnot, and of course, it's kind of like a slight animosity to lovers kind of a deal. Oh, also, Marigold has a curse, and no one can love her, or something bad will happen. We don't know what exactly, but honey witches can't have love because of the curse. This one has a cute concept, cute vibes, enjoyable in that sense. But I just found the story overall very lacking and flat. It just didn't do anything for me, and some of it just kind of grated me in a weird way. Like, some of it was just like, like there's somewhat steamy stuff in this, like not hugely, but there's a little bit of steam. And there were points when the characters act, like what they say was just really awkward for me. It was just like, I don't know, I feel kind of weird about this. And I'm a girl who likes steamy bits. Now, I understand I don't usually read sapphic romance as much, but yeah, it just wasn't, this wasn't it for me, unfortunately. It's a cute general concept. It's a physically beautiful book, but I just didn't find it particularly great. I gave it 3 stars because, again, it just kind of fell flat for me. I never really felt a huge connection to the characters. Another problem, apparently, I was having at this time. And this one is adult, but it feels a little YA-ish, despite some of the steamy bits. I don't know. And also, it was extremely predictable, unfortunately. It is what it is. It's not terrible, but I don't think this is really all that worth it. And then next, I read a book I borrowed from a friend called and this one is YA romance, called Alex Approximately by Jen Bennett. Now, this one was cute. It's a basic concept of a gal where again, we're just gonna forego names because I can't seem to remember a single name from anything ever. And I don't have the physical book anymore. And I don't really want to look it up. So we have a gal. She ends up moving to live with her father because her mom is like having marital issues with her stepdad. So she moves to live with her father, and in the meantime, she's been online friends with this guy, and she has a big thing for him. And she's going to be moving to right near where he is. And in the meantime, she gets a job, and she has like a grating initial experience with one of the security guys there. And obviously, this ends up becoming a romance because it's a young adult romance. I thought it was cute. I really liked it. I liked the characters. The characters in this one had much more distinct, obvious personalities and whatnot. I gave it 3.5 stars. I thought it was cute, but it is pretty predictable and pretty obvious, like what one of the twists. But as a whole, I think it's a cute, enjoyable read. And this one I would actually recommend more than most of what I've told you about so far. Pretty much all of them. I think this one was more worth it if you like a cute young adult romance. And then next, I finally finished out the War of Lost Hearts trilogy, and I read Mother of Death and Dawn. Now, I should also say, that's a bit of a lie, I listened to it as an audiobook. I wanted to try to physically read this, but this book is ginormous, and I just was not feeling it. I really wasn't feeling it. I was like, I am not in the mood to read this. I find that is a perfect opportunity for an audiobook, and so that's what I did, and I'm really glad I did that. It was a much better decision for me to just go ahead and listen to this instead of reading it, so I did. Now, I can't really tell you a ton about it other than it stars our girl Tisana, who was a slave in another country, and then she moves to another country in hopes of getting help for the people in her country who are slaves, who are people who were conquered by another nation. And there's a romance between her and a guy called Maxentarius, who is like a broody, grumpy guy who was used as a weapon in a different war. Anyway, she learns magic and stuff. So it's a basic like fantasy romance, and there's fae in this. It's a fae one. Okay. So I thought that so like I said, I listened to it because, again, I just wasn't in the mood or particularly interested, and I was like, but I gotta finish this. Like, it's just been sitting here forever, and, you know, I was trying to finish out books. So anyway, I listened to it. This was fine. Actually, this was pretty good as a whole. It did take a long time for me to get into it, to be honest with you, because one of the things about this book is it just felt like never-ending bad stuff happens. It's not like super depressing. It could be like Game of Thrones level, and it's not. It's not that bad. But it just feels like a constant monotonous, and then this, and they went here, and then this. And I never was like really driven into it, you know, because it was just thing after thing after thing. And it was hard to tell where it was going. Now, sometimes I don't like predictability. In fact, I complained about that in some of these other books about how easily predictable things were. In this one, it is unpredictable, but at the same time, you're just not really sure where the whole story is trying to go. And I think that's more of my complaint, is it's just like, where are we going? Like, what is the end game of this? I have no idea. Like, okay. And you kind of have an idea, and there is a basic plot around that, but again, it just felt monotonous. That said, I do think that as a whole, this series is really good. And as far as like fantasy romance goes, this is a good one. I do recommend it. In fact, I gave this one 4 stars, and I would honestly recommend this series for people who are interested in fantasy romance. Just know that it is very ongoing. You know, it is steamy, which is good to know. And yeah, I overall think that this is a good series. It's just like I said, it does feel a little on the monotonous side, in my opinion, but I do think it's good. Next, I read one of my 12 and 12 books. So I'm doing the challenge where you read 12 books in 12 months, books recommended by friends or family as well, if you so desire. So this one was a recommendation from my friend Jeff, and I read Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. Now, this one is a historical fiction. I got it from the library. That's why I don't physically have it. And it is about a gentleman who is a count in Russia. And the revolution has happened. And he gets very, very lucky that instead of being executed, he manages to charm his way into simply being under house arrest. And he is forced to live in a hotel. A fancy hotel at that. So it's actually, not that bad. I mean, his room is, they downgrade his room, unfortunately for him. But, it's a lot better than being executed, that's for sure. But he's not allowed to leave the hotel. And it talks about him and his life there. This is a very slow, methodical book about his day-to-day life and the characters, and who are, of course, the people who work at the hotel. And it builds up slowly over time to what you get at the end. And it's funny because if you read the synopsis for this book, what it says that the book is about doesn't happen until well over halfway through the book. So just a heads up. I'm doing an even more vague explanation because of the fact that I know that main plot point doesn't happen for quite a while. Anyway, he makes friends with people at the hotel. He actually ends up starting to work as a waiter at the hotel because, he's somebody who understands how the wait staff should behave and and he's actually really good at it, So it's basically, he's a very charming man, and how he finds out how to live in this new world, this new Russia, and not, how he has to figure out how to adapt and survive this. And I know, it's a very thoughtful novel. There's a lot of thought put into it. You get a lot of interesting aside stories and things like that. This is a great book. It wasn't exactly my cup of tea because it is very slow and methodical. It took me a long time to finish this one because, it's slow. And it's not a short book either. But it is good and it is worth it. One of my friends, actually, so Jeff recommended it, and then Melissa in Stitches, had said she loved the audiobook. I probably, if I had a little more sense, I would have done the audiobook. It would have been, I don't know what the narrator sounds like, but that might have been a better experience. So just putting that out there if anyone's interested. But yeah, like I said, it's an interesting, thoughtful book. I gave it 4 stars. I feel like that's a little low, but I kind of rate things based on just the pleasure I got out of it. I thought it was a great book. It's just, again, it is very slow and methodical, but you have a lot of interesting parts of this time in history and how Russia is changing and how, again, his adaptability and trying to figure out how he's going to make it in this world where he's stuck in a hotel. Anyway, it's good stuff. And I mean, I'm doing really well in that challenge. Next, I read The Life Impossible by Matt Haig. Now, he's also the gentleman who wrote The Midnight Library. I loved The Midnight Library. That was another one of my 12 and 12 recommendations. And I love that book. This one is very interesting. It is about an older English woman. So this one, I actually got from the library again. It was very nice. Somebody put it on hold for me ahead of time, which that was really thoughtful. So this one is about an older English woman named Grace Winters who, when her son died quite young, I think he was only 11, And it devastated her for the rest of her life. And her husband has also passed at this point. She's in her like 70s, and she's just like barely hanging on there. And she finds out that someone who she'd been friends with for a brief time has passed away and left her house to Grace. And Grace is like, okay. And it's in like Spain. So she's just like, well, I don't have anything better to do. So she goes ahead and moves there. And she starts hearing rumors of this unexplained phenomena and whatnot in this area. And rumors that maybe her friend didn't really die. Like, what's going on? She doesn't know what's going on. And she's wondering this whole time, like, why did this gal leave me this house? Like, doesn't she have better stuff to do? Like, why is this house left to me? I don't know. This book has similar vibes to like the Midnight Library, but it's a little bit different in that this one is definitely more of an environmental message kind of a book about how important the environment is, which I appreciated and enjoyed. There's a lot more, well, the Midnight Library, I suppose you could say, the entire concept of it is very fantastical, but it's something that you can kind of believe would be possible because we don't know what happens when we die, you know? This one is very out there. It is out there. And it is much more like fantasy based. So that's something to keep in mind. But I thought overall this was a solid book. It was good. I didn't love it as much as The Midnight Library. I gave this one 4 stars. It's not that it's bad or anything. It just, it didn't resonate with me the same way. There were pieces of it that did. Like letting go of guilt is one of the big themes of this book, and it is handled very beautifully. And the overall plot of the book, I found enjoyable. Like I wanted to know what was going to happen next. I was sucked in. You know, we end up with these interesting, like this interesting dynamic of good versus evil and whatnot, and I guess the power to believe in yourself, which is it went a little too far in that direction for my personal taste, but again, it was enjoyable. And as a whole, I'd recommend it, honestly. It just wasn't like a super favorite. We're getting there. Next, another audiobook. I listened to West with Giraffes by Linda Rutledge. This book has the concept of it's an old man telling the story of how when he was younger during the Depression, yes, it was during the Depression, right at the beginning of World War II, he ended up driving a pair of giraffes across country to get them to a zoo. The giraffes had gone over on a boat, and the weather, it was terrible. It was an accident. One of the giraffes is injured, and they just need to get the giraffes there as fast as they can, as safely as possible, so that the injured giraffe can get healed. And it's this young man who's like scrappy, or it's an old man telling a story of when he was a young man and he was all scrappy and just like, this is what, scrappy do get, like, go-getter, and he's had a tough life. There's background behind that, and it's him and an old man that travel across. And then there is a love interest character as well, a young lady who wants to photograph the giraffes in their journey and try to get her pictures into Time magazine, or Life magazine, because Life, yeah. Okay, a pretty quick way to sum up this book is it's very similar to Water for Elephants. Very, very similar, except it's giraffes. Because you've got the same storytelling device of old man telling story of young self. Like the same thing. You've got female character who is actually married. Now in this case, the marriage situation is a little bit different. It's not a horribly abusive man. He's just kind of a bit of a jerk. But you've got that whole situation. You've got the animals, the giraffes, which of course they bond with. it's very, very similar vibes. So if you like Water for Elephants, I think there's a good chance you'd like this one. I thought it was good. This was a recommendation. This is not one of my 12 and 12, but it was a recommendation from my husband's great aunt. And I thought this was an overall enjoyable book, but it wasn't, it was a lot of this book is really heavy handed. It's very like, and it takes a long time for the main character named Woody Nickel is his name, which is funny. It takes a long time for him to develop as a character, but at the same time, I understand. Like, he needed to go through certain trials and tribulations to develop and become a better person, and I get that. And like, honestly, it's fine. But at the same time, you do get somewhat frustrated with him at points because it's just like, oh my god, my guy, like, why do you not learn? But he does eventually. It takes some really, you know. It can be like that with characters sometimes. And another thing I found a little bit interesting about this book is I thought some of the more progressive part of it, like, okay, so with a lot of historical fiction, which this is, you get characters are just magically like super progressive in attitude, whereas these characters, it's very clear that the characters, all of our main white characters are actually racist, but like the right amount of racist for the time, if that makes sense. Like, they're not complete jerks. In fact, there is a major situation where they interact with some black people, and they're actually some black people, and they're actually, the interactions are positive. It is, you know, but they have a fear and like a nervousness that I think is appropriate for that time period. Whereas I feel like a lot of authors would go for the attitude of my character is magically not racist at all, which, how historically accurate is that? Who knows? And it's, you know, I know I'm not explaining this very well, and I'm worried people are going to be thinking like that I'm awful. What I'm saying is, I think that there's certain attitudes I think the attitudes of the characters are more accurate than what you would expect for a lot of historical fiction novels. I think it is understandable for characters to be more wary, and, you know, they're not going to be magically PC, you know? So I actually thought, but at the same time, the way that the book portrays things is very obviously not racist, in my opinion. But anyway, I'm a white gal, so like, there's only so much I can say about that in terms of like how it's a hard thing for me to fully express, and I'm worried I'm going to come off the wrong way when I'm trying to explain this. But basically, like, I think a lot of historical fiction, the characters act in a way that is more progressive in our current society as opposed to what was progressive for the time period they're in. And I don't hate that. Like, I think it's fine. You know what I mean? I don't get too upset about it. But at the same time, it is, because it is nice to, in a way, it can be refreshing to see characters be properly kind and thoughtful to others despite the time period. However, I think the way this book portrays things is much more accurate to as progressive as you're going to get for back then, if that makes sense. That was a better summation of it. Anyway, I gave it 3.5 stars. I can't remember if I said that. It wasn't bad. The narration is done by an older gentleman. I thought he did a good job. And except there were certain things, and there's certain repetitive phrases that eventually, like, the old man was cooing his giraffe speak, and it was just like, cooing his giraffe speak is said 500 times in this book, and I think that there could have been some other ways of saying that. And one other thing is the way the narrator said California. And after a while, it was just comical to me. Like, it was a little off and then became more and more, like, comical as I went through the book. Anyway, as a whole, though, it's good. And I do think the narrator did a good job. It's just, A lot of these phrases are repeated. It's not his fault, right? And the last book, finally, that I read this month was another 12 and 12, and that was Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. This was recommended by my friend Peggy, and I have read one other Ann Patchett. I read State of Wonder a long time ago, which was a good book that I don't know how to explain. I didn't love that book. Like, the ending, it's not my type of a book, we'll just say. But it was a good book. Like, it wasn't bad. But Tom Lake was really cool. So this book is basically, it actually happens during the pandemic. And this family gets stuck together, and they live on a cherry farm. It's the mom, dad, and 3 daughters. And they all are, the 3 daughters, they're all very different, like in terms of what they want to do with their lives and whatnot. And what ends up happening is the mother is telling the story of when she dated this guy who ended up becoming a really famous actor. Like, I feel like he was a big actor. Like, we're thinking like Brad Pitt level actor from the way everybody acts in the book about this guy. And so the mom was an actress at one point too, and she's telling the story of like her being an actress and her eventually meeting this famous guy and her dating him. So I felt like from the concept alone this didn't sound that interesting, and yet I was hooked. I loved this book. It just grabbed me, and I was so interested in what was going to happen. And there's other just like pieces of it that I really enjoyed. Like, I really enjoyed the interactions between the family. And it's very obvious this mom is a good mom. She knows her kids so well. And she has a lot of moments when she talks about like how she talks to her daughters and how she treats them all differently because she knows them. I loved that. I liked the way she interacted with her kids, and like the daughters were a hoot. They're so funny, like, in how interested they are in the story and different aspects that they're interested with the story. And then learning about the characters in the past. And even though you generally know how the story's going to end, you know, I was still sucked in the whole time. Like, it just doesn't seem like it would be that fascinating, but it was for me, and I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars out of 5. I think it was a really well done book. And like I said, I was sucked in the whole time. And it felt very real. Like, it really, like, I felt like it was real that this young lady, she'd had a chance at being an amazing actress, and she was interesting because she was like, well, I'm a good actress when I'm doing this one specific role. Like, or type of role. Like, she had one specific thing that she was really good at, but she felt like she wasn't an actress with range, and it's also really cute because you get as a bit of a side plot how she meets their dad. And I think there's something to be said about, instead of just a fiery, hot, passionate love, the more gentle, romantic, like, people, like, the more, the quieter type of love that people can feel too. And I think that's valid. And I think it's something that is often overlooked. So, okay, that's finally it. This is going to take me forever to edit, but I did it. I got through everything. These are the books I read in August and September. Now, I've been reading faster, finally, so hopefully I'll make a video in November for my October reads, because hopefully I'll have enough to actually to warrant doing another separate update. Anyway, I hope you're all doing well. If you've actually watched this, could you give me a witchy hat? I'm assuming they have a witch hat emoji, or like a witch or something. Broom, anything of that nature. And, I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's going to be a little while before I post this, so hopefully it'll be pre-Halloween, but I hope you're doing well.